Welcome to Uninvited, the show where we cover news that matters to Ontario women. On this program, we're talking about the 2-year-long battle being fought by small businesses to stay afloat in this province. After 22 months of lockdown restrictions, capacity limitations, and patchwork government support, at least 75,000 Ontario small businesses are at the risk of shutting their doors for good. But first, here are some recent headlines. Ontario hit a grim milestone recently, officially 1 million cases of COVID-19. Now, due to the government's inability to test everyone with symptoms, it's likely we hit that number some time ago, but it marks how much this pandemic has impacted all of us. A failure to react to Omicron quickly over the holidays undoubtedly contributed to the rapid rise of cases and the subsequent abrupt shutdowns that impacted the lives of millions. As Ontario moves forward with reopening, the Ford government hasn't committed to supporting Ontarians with more access to testing, meaning we're continuing to be without clarity over the true toll COVID has taken on our society. As Omicron continues to spread, data is showing more children are ending up in Ontario's emergency rooms. Doctors say Omicron appears to affect children differently than other variants of COVID by causing more coughing and difficulty breathing. Kids under 5 who cannot be vaccinated have been admitted in higher numbers than at any other point in the pandemic. That worrying data comes as school absences are starting to be reported by the government. This is their response to trying to provide information over potential COVID cases in schools. But the system has been panned by parents, teachers, and school boards saying it doesn't go far enough. And only days into the return to school, more than 330 schools were reporting absence rates of 30% or higher. The pandemic continues to disrupt our children's education. Meanwhile, child vaccination rates continue to lag, with under 15% of those 5 to 11 being fully vaccinated compared to those 12 to 17, where the fully vaccinated rate is over 83%. Anyone trying to enter the housing market in so many parts of Ontario knows there are serious supply issues resulting in sky-high prices. According to a recent report by the Building Industry and Land Development Association, provincial governments have underestimated population growth and overestimated the amount of housing built in the Greater Toronto and Hamilton areas over the last 7 years. The report is called Forecast for Failure, and it's no wonder. It highlights how mistakes of governments past and present have only exacerbated the housing crisis facing Ontario. It's expected the province will need nearly 1 million new homes to deal with the expected population growth between now and 2030. So far, there's been no concrete plans from any level of government on how we'll actually get there. The housing crisis was front and center as members of the Ford government met with municipal leaders across Ontario. The verdict from those who attended was there's no plan or any new funding from the province beyond a streamlined development approval fund to help cities and towns speed up development approvals. The Ford government has significantly increased the use of ministerial zoning orders to ram through projects without proper consideration or consultation from municipalities, those living in the areas involved, or even discounting environmental concerns. And just last month, an agency of the provincial government sold public land to a private developer in Mississauga with no condition for affordable housing. Simply put, this isn't the way we're going to build those needed 1 million houses. Research from the Toronto Star has also found that most developers receiving ministerial zoning orders are the same ones who are donating to the PC party. Housing is expected to be a big issue heading into June's provincial election. Recent data from Statistics Canada shows just how much our economy has changed under the realities of restrictions and lockdowns. Since the beginning of the pandemic, more than 200,000 restaurant workers have left the industry. It's created a transformation of the workforce, leading to shortages of staff in the sectors of the economy hardest hit by the restrictions. And that's really the topic of today's program, Ontario's small businesses and their attempts to keep their doors open after 2 years of lockdowns, capacity restrictions, and a patchwork of supports from the Ford government and Ottawa. The latest lockdown began easing in late January, meaning that businesses such as restaurants and gyms were able to cautiously reopen to customers for indoor service. But this latest shutdown and round of capacity restrictions came with next to little financial support from the province, meaning thousands of businesses continue to hemorrhage income while customers all but disappeared. Most businesses have said that the small business grants offered by the government wasn't nearly enough to cover costs, let alone how long it took to receive it. Businesses were shut into January, but money wasn't released until February. For those businesses already drowning under debt from the pandemic, they needed this support immediately. Think about the businesses most impacted by restrictions, like gyms, salons, and restaurants. The grant money did little to meaningfully support them. It seems like the Ford government simply doesn't understand how to support small businesses. They talk the talk, but when it comes to supports throughout every lockdown, they were late to roll out programs and cheap on how much they were offering. It's not just the supports either. The disjointed information released by the government created problems for businesses forced to shut down or being allowed to reopen. No heads up provided on either side, meaning increased costs by having to throw out food in the case of restaurants or having to stay closed longer when trying to recall employees to open up again with barely 24 hours notice. Ryan Mala with the Canadian Federation of Independent Business said that reopening isn't, quote, like flipping a switch. Business owners need time to recall their staff, set up their spaces, secure supply, and implement health and safety plans. Despite the province now having executed restrictions 3 times, small businesses have been left scrambling and pushed further into debt every time. Take, for example, Toronto's Paintbox Bistro, a cornerstone in Regent Park. They recently announced that they'll be closing after 10 years. This news is particularly devastating as they were dedicated to supporting and hiring people from Regent Park community, many of who face systemic barriers to employment. And unfortunately, this is becoming all too common of a narrative across our province. Small businesses that create, support, and feed our local communities, unable to pay rent and out of options. It all leads to an increase in unemployment and a hit to our local economies, all while reshaping the social fabric of our communities. The numbers have already begun to show this stark reality. According to the Canadian Federation of Independent Business in 2021, around 75,000 Ontario businesses were at risk of closing, and the average small business in Ontario now has an estimated $190,000 in COVID debt, and 18% of those businesses are considering bankruptcy. More comprehensive and immediate help is needed for the small businesses of our neighborhoods before our communities become unrecognizable. Today, we're joined by 2 small business owners from the GTA. Cindy Stern is the co-owner of the long-standing restaurant Bistro on Avenue, and Julie Daigle is the owner of Blow, a salon on the Danforth. Cindy has turned to Twitter as a way to keep in touch with her close-knit community and voice her lockdown fears and frustrations. Julie has become a small business owner right at the beginning of the pandemic and has spent the last 2 years trying to keep up with the reactionary safety regulations that have riddled her industry with uncertainty and extended closures. Julie, Cindy, welcome to the show. Tell us a bit about yourselves and the businesses that you run. Why don't we start with you, Cindy?
Well, I've been in with the Bistro on Avenue now as a partner for the last 20 years. Prior to that, I was a banker in downtown Toronto, and we're just trying to keep a successful business running for the last 3 years and keep everyone safe and healthy, and I think we're doing a good job of it.
Julie, how about you?
I am an owner and operator of a blow-dry bar. We do hair, makeup services, and I opened in November 2019, so just about 4.5 months before the first lockdown. Not the best timing, but been surviving ever since and believe in the concept and believe in the business, so working hard at it.
When we think about some of the groups that have been most affected by the pandemic, I think small business is one of those that comes to mind. So maybe you could talk to us a bit about how you've been surviving and dealing with the last 2 years during the pandemic.
Well, I think originally when we first heard of a first lockdown, it was we didn't even know if they meant we're completely closing or not, even takeout and delivery. When they said it's going to be indoor dining, that's closed. We already had a good base for takeout and delivery, so I think we were a lot more fortunate than some other restaurants. So we decided to build on that while we were locked down.
And Julie, like salons were probably among the last to get permission to open up. And so how did that affect your business? How did you deal with it?
And we're still restricted. We cannot do any makeup services, which is a big part of our business. Nothing where a face covering needs to be taken off. I was 4.5 months in, so hadn't turned a profit yet, was just building the team. And then when that happened, I, for the first few months, completely shut down. I did not post anything on social media. And then after a while, I picked myself back up, built an online platform for people to buy products. Now, unlike takeout, people don't really buy expensive shampoo on a weekly basis, but some of our loyal clients were helping us out. But it was difficult. The first lockdown was definitely difficult.
A lot of the frustration that we hear from small business owners is the consistency in terms of how lockdowns were applied, how arbitrarily they were applied to different sectors of businesses, including small business. What are your views on that?
Well, especially recently, when restaurants were forced to lock down again, but we're still allowed to do takeout and delivery, we are only allowed to operate at 50% capacity when it comes to hair, no makeup. And then they came out with the grant for restaurants, which my street is full of restaurants, but no one was going anywhere. So no one looks at the ramifications of closing one industry and how it will impact the others. So we weren't eligible for that grant, which that one was really a dagger to the heart. I come from a corporate background, love spreadsheets, honestly love spreadsheets. And I still found it difficult to compare the different programs and figure out which one was more beneficial. And I think my biggest difficulty, having only opened in November 2019, is every single one of those programs look at a revenue drop. I was brand new. So of course my months now are better than they've ever been. So I'm no longer entitled to any of those programs. Still not doing anywhere close to what I should be doing, but doing better than my first and second month in business. I can't show a drop in revenue.
Cindy, I want to ask you about a tweet that blew up when you decided as a restaurant you weren't going to allow people in without being vaccinated, even if they had a medical exemption.
Yes, I know. I was just finished my exercise that morning and thought I'm going to send out an FYI, not knowing that would go viral. So I was so at the point then of fear and protection of the staff, protection of the business, keeping it viable. And I was watching the TV that morning saying there were doctors coming out and making up for $50, they'll make you up fake medical exemptions. And I know they were far and few between, but I thought, if we're going to start this and reopen and keep our staff safe, keep the customer safe, I'm going to restrict it to vaccinated only. Not thinking that I was going to get pushback on it. In fact, what I got was, we were talking about this earlier, I'd say 85% of the people were so supportive, they kept saying, I'm coming to your place, I'm going to feel safe, thank you for your stance on COVID. I did get about 15% of real anti-vaxxers and real threats of calling me a Nazi, which is very ironic because my mother was a Holocaust survivor. So I get emotional over that. And saying they're going to throw bricks through our window, we're going to set your kitchen on fire. So I actually did hire a security firm for that first day of opening.
Can't believe you had to go through that.
Well, it's just, people kept saying, well, maybe you shouldn't have put that out. Look at the replies you're getting. And I said, they are minimal. They also went on Google review. I mean, your pizza is horrible. We don't even sell pizza. But that's where you saw some of those haters crawling out.
Well, sort of connected to that, it kind of leads me to small businesses, restaurants, salons became enforcers for things like mask mandates, mandatory vaccinations, and again, something that was put on the small business owner that maybe not necessarily was applied across the board, right?
Now I feel like they've really pushed us aside and there's very limited information that we were able to find on what can we do, what can't we do, when will things change. And they said, yeah, if you want to enforce it, how do we enforce it? But so much or so few pieces of information on how we're able to operate. I read something on my Leslieville community board on Facebook that said, I do facials. Can I do facials? Can I not do facials? We're never listed anywhere. Estheticians are not listed anywhere. So right now, we're completely left in the dark about those restrictions, and it's just, we just fly by the seat of our pants.
I think we're on year 3 now. I mean,
Yeah.
we need some clarity. You need some
December
clarity.
19th, personal care services are going back to 50%. And in my group chat with all the other franchise partners, we're talking, aren't we already at 50%? And then what is 50% capacity? No one told us. First lockdown, we just crossed off every other chair. Then it became, no, it has to do with your square footage, how much your equipment takes up of that square footage. So by the time Christmas was rolling around, we were on a roll. It was our first Christmas in 2 years. We were excited. That's where we make most, it's your Super Bowl.
It's our Super Bowl. Right.
That's our Christmas and New Year's is when people get all dolled up. And then those restrictions came and it looked like we could have 16 guests and 10 staff. And it made no sense. You can't socially distance with that many people in a space. So from day one, we've never actually known what our capacity is. So maybe we restricted ourselves too much. Maybe we could have done more. In the dark, completely.
How have your employees been affected by the way small business has been allowed to succeed or not succeed in these past few years?
It's been an incredible roller coaster. We invest a lot of time hiring, training, building a team. And so throughout the second lockdown, my first lockdown, I lost all my employees but one. Second lockdown, I kept them, and we Zoomed together, and we cried together, and we laughed together. And again, it was like don't worry, we're going to reopen. It's going to be stronger than ever. We're a great team. And so you become a cheerleader, which takes a lot out of you also, because then you hang up the phone and you go, oh my God, I hope this really happens.
In the first lockdown, when we lost bartenders and servers, when I tried to rehire, it wasn't like the old days where we kept people around for so long. I would hire somebody, they would quit in 2 days without any notice because they found something better. It's not the same for bartenders and servers anymore. I think they're going to be slim pickings for people, and they have a different attitude, and I can't say I blame them. They're going to look for that next best thing, and I don't think a front of a house in a restaurant is it.
I'm wondering if you feel as though you have confidence in the government to do more than just talk. I mean, we hear the premier, a lot of his catchphrases is one is, he's for the small guy. And does that ring true to you? How does that feel when you hear that? Especially when we see big box stores being able to operate in instances where small businesses had to shut down. How does that feel? How does it make you feel?
I honestly believe that Doug Ford is probably a really nice guy to sit in the backyard and have a barbecue with. And I do believe he thinks he's for the little guy and probably is. And that's why I think he's completely out of his element as Premier of Ontario, because you got to get past the folks and the folksy stuff and Arthur, his neighbor, and his pickup truck driving around in his little mini shovel. You got to get past that and think bigger picture.
In my house, we were not fans of Ford before the pandemic. He grew on us at the beginning. I think seeing him on TV and seeing the emotion, and it's hard. Like I've always said, they didn't sign up to manage a pandemic. But then some of the decisions they made were just asinine. Oh my goodness, some horrible decisions were made along the way that really were really aggravating. Really aggravating, because I do believe that there's no way these 300-400 people in line at Costco or at Walmart shopping for everything, not even necessities, anything they need. Don't tell me that those didn't contribute to higher cases that could have maybe been avoided and shortened the lockdowns.
Well, Doug Ford, I think his advisor rules by polls. So they put out all these polls and decide who wants what and where will the votes go. And I think too many of the decisions are made.
Look at the school decisions, closures. We close, we open, we close. Just all of it seemed all over the place. It didn't look like there was a clear plan. And I know in a pandemic, things change. Things change on a weekly basis, daily basis. New variants come into play. But I don't know. I don't think it was the best. I think he should have been stronger If he is for the little guy, then take a stance and stay for the little guy. Don't fold under the pressure of having those stores open, whatever kind of pressure got to him for that. But yeah, that was definitely enraging.
We see inequities in terms of bigger businesses being allowed to operate at certain capacity levels or during lockdowns. Why is that? I mean, it just seems unfair to me.
I agree with you. I think there should have been lockdowns in the Walmarts and the Costco's. I think Doug Ford made a lot of errors in this province. If we have to lock down that our 50%, whatever those capacities should have been everywhere.
Small bookstores, small clothing, apparel, boutiques. I'm on the Danforth. It's all mom and pop shop. They're all just individual shops. That's probably the one thing that got me really, really angry is seeing those big box stores and seeing the lineups and people getting in and so many people and buying clothes and buying books and when those small bookstores were just going out of business. So that is probably the one thing that I would say really, really got me angry when it came to the decisions the government made.
Do you think the people who are in charge of making the decisions, like, the medical officers, the governments, the MPPs, the MPs, do you think they understand what small businesses have been going through and what they need moving forward?
Well, unfortunately, I think if we listen to the doctors and the scientists, they knew what to do. But politics will always get in the way, right? There's a June election coming up. How many people does he want to pander to? Who does he want on his sides?
Small businesses they're like the heart of the community, right? You get to know people who live in your neighborhood. They come in, they get to know you and rely on you. And when those small businesses don't thrive and they disappear, what does that mean for the community?
For Danforth, Greektown is such a tight-knit community. It broke my heart to see some of those institutions like a Cafe Frappe close down after, 30, 40, 50 years. It really was an institution. It's a Mary Brown's chicken. So the only people that can afford rent are bigger corporations. I can tell you, for me, my saving grace has been my partner, who we both quit our corporate careers about 6 months apart. Horrible timing again. But his business was able to survive through the pandemic and he kept going to work. And without his support, financial, moral, emotional, I would have lost my house that I've owned for 12 years. I would have lost my car. I would have lost my business. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who aren't as fortunate as I was to have that type of support. I would have lost everything. I would have lost everything, which is a scary thought.
Julie, Cindy, thank you so much for being here and sharing your perspectives as small business owners.
Thank you for having us.
A pleasure. Thank you very much.
And thank you all for tuning in. This has been Uninvited Working Ontario Women News. Now it's time for a segment that we call I'm Speaking. It's your chance to let us know what you're thinking, your thoughts, your concerns, your frustrations. Send us your message at actwow.ca. Now, I'm speaking.
I'm speaking. I'm speaking. I'm speaking. I'm speaking. If you don't mind letting me finish. I'm speaking.
I'm Frankie, and Doug Ford and the Doug Ford government are failing patients across the Ontario mental health care system. Access to mental health care should not be exclusive only to those who can afford private health care options. Mental health care is health care and should be universally accessible across all identities and backgrounds.